Welcome back, friends, to another episode of the Performance Mindset Podcast. I am your host, CEO of Beyond Commercial, Amy Calandrino. You can go to Beyond Commercial anytime for our latest listings, job openings, and what we do. We've been providing commercial real estate assistance now for about a decade and a half to business owners and families. Along the way, I've met some impactful and influential leaders, and the goal of this podcast is share some of their insights. So if you're looking to grow, you are tuning in to the right show. Today, I have with me Izzy Griffin, and I have some info here, and I never want to miss it. She is the inspiring founder of Red Dott. That's 2 D's and then 2 T's, a fashion brand born from, let me start back over. Izzy Griffin is the inspiring founder of Red Dott with 2 D's and 2 D's, a fashion brand born from a desire to empower women through the beauty of vintage handcrafted pieces. It was established in 2022. It offers unique cuff bracelets made from globally sourced vintage textiles. Izzy's love for fashion stems from her grandmother and her great-grandmother, who taught her the value of stories embedded into every piece of fabric. Her appreciation for cultural diversity deepened from her family's connection to Punjab, India, adding a rich tapestry of influences to her work. Izzy has triumphed over personal adversities, including she's a survivor of domestic violence. She channels her journey of resilience into her brand, inspiring others to discover their own strength and beauty. Red Dott stands for a testament to the power of transformation and the celebration of women's narratives. Welcome to the show, Izzy.
Hi, I'm so excited.
Can you
Am I here?
Do you have anything specific that you think of in your mind? Yeah, I can hear you. So do you think of anything specific in your mind how Red Dott came to be, and a little bit more about the starting of this brand?
Yeah, so when you're starting a business, especially a creative one, you as a creator are trying to formulate your words as your process is going with everything. And I have broken it down into the fact that I was always looking for somebody as I was going through the process of healing with my complex PTSD. I'm a fighter, and I knew I wanted to conquer. And so as I was going through the process, I was looking for a leader that I could look up to that had overcome it, to show me how that success could happen. And so I was like, you know what? I've always been in the arts. I want to create something that has a nostalgic behavior to it and also has a sensory behavior to it for healing. But I want to create a brand that is about overcoming traumas. And because I don't feel that like it gets talked enough about really just overcoming things. And so the marker is that like, having that cuff on you, you can touch it. And I was like, I really want to be able to stamp inside it. So I got a stamper and I was like, I want to start putting intentional words in things and make it where it can be customized too. If people are like, hey, I really am focused on this right now, then I could customize it for them. So we stamp inside of each bracelet a word to phrases that are things that you can overcome. Like some of the newer things that we're putting in our cups are big shifts. There's some other ones I'm like going blank right now. Powerful. One of the things that I always was focused on was determination. That was something that
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to stamp in things. And so those are sort of the things that we stamp inside of each one of them.
Red Dot stands as a testament to the power of transformation and celebration of women's narrative. Welcome to the show, Izzy.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, I think we're doing good. We
Good.
talked a little bit about how this has evolved and, how you infuse a bit of inspiration into every piece and the creative elements about that. We've talked a bit about that offline, but do you want to share a little bit with the listeners about the evolution of the brand and where you're at now?
So, yeah, I would love to
Yeah.
share with you how it has evolved. So, I created Red Dot from a past that I'd come from domestic violence, and I'd gotten out of the situation and had complex PTSD. And so something that I was looking into was like leaders that I could look up to that had overcome it, because I'm a fighter and I wanted to conquer overcoming PTSD, complex PTSD. And so I was thinking of something that I could do, and I wanted to go back into the arts. And so I wanted to create a brand that was all about achieving, overcoming, traumas. You don't have to walk through what I went through, but we all come from traumas. And so what I wanted to create was a cuff that you could wear that had nostalgic parts to it, but then also it was a sensory part to it. And so that way you can touch it and look at it. But we also, inside the cuff, do stamping. And so I wanted to create intentional words. So some of the things that I put into my cuffs is determination is one of those big words, is to overcome. Another thing that we've put in now is big shifts or little shifts, just something that can, really curate your overcoming things. And you can even just do intentional growths of like, overcoming bad habits, because we all have bad habits. So, even if it's like,
They
hey,
do.
I'm not going to be an overachiever today. I'm going to accept, just being here today, I think is a huge thing.
What do you mean just being like a human being? I thought I'm a human doing.
Totally. I mean, I get into my perfectionist times where I'm like, oh, I have to like do everything perfect. Yeah. And it's like, wait, that's the beauty of art. Nothing is perfect. Nothing is, so, you want to achieve your best self, but you don't want to be too hard on yourself. You're enough.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can appreciate that. How long was it after you had gone through the domestic violence situation that you went through before kind of Red Dot came to being? Did it take a lot of time, and was it probably like the seventh step in the journey to get through this, or can you talk a little bit about that? You don't have to get too detailed, but share whatever you want to share, because some people listening might want to kind of hear how
I don't mind sharing this at all. I mean, that is something that I even tell people, like, if you want to talk, my cell phone's on the card, on my business card. You can call me anytime, because I wanted to be that kind of leader that was open enough to talking about what I had gone through and how I occurred to be here. So your question is a great question. So, because I tell people now, I'm like, looking at me now, you would think that I hadn't gone through something like that. But I went through the domestic violent relationship for 15 years. I got told by my therapist when I got out that I was on the verge of no return because there's 4 stages to complex PTSD. And I definitely had a horrible
Mm.
fog in my brain. I didn't know if I could ever um, be able to function as a normal human being, like even having a job to taking care of myself. Thankfully, I had great parents that wanted to support me in my healing process. It took about 5 years in a car wreck. I got in a horrible car accident, and it was something that I probably should have died in, but I didn't. And it was something that jarred me out of my other trauma. And it took the fog. It was like immediate where I knew that something was different because I couldn't even stop drinking. Like I was a typical battered woman where you go through these bad habits of like, well, that was my friend. So I definitely had a drinking problem back then where it was like, I can't even stop. And I was somebody that could stop things, but like because of my complex PTSD brain, I couldn't just do a normal stop of doing something. So I had a bad relationship with alcohol. And so immediately when the wreck happened, I was like, I can stop drinking. And I stopped drinking and I was able to stop doing other bad habits, because that's what happens in a complex PTSD mind, is that you've created bad habits for survival skills. And so I overcame a lot of things. I kept on going to therapy. So I did CPT therapy, where I had to walk through each event and really like tell myself, like, so how CPT actually works is like you name the event, then you tell yourself what you're feeling in that moment of that event, and then you say, does that like stand the test of time? Does that feeling and what you've told yourself stand the test of time? Like, would it be held up in the court of law as truth? And one of those examples would be like, I'm a horrible person. And I would be like, am I a horrible person? But like at the end of the day, my therapist would be like, it is sort of like riding a bike of just being like, no, you're not a horrible person, and so that can't stand up in the court of law. And so little by little, I was picking up those pieces of regaining and telling myself, I'm enough. Like every lie I was told from my, past partner was a lie, and so it took about 5 years to overcome those things, but I overcame them. I ended up meeting a man that is now my husband, and I didn't even realize that I was still dealing with like some of my hermit sides to me and my PTSD. And he sort of came in and just like loved me and accepted me for what I had to offer. And so he really built me up as, just just within love, love and acceptance. And that was a true part of a lot of my healing too, was just being a part of the fact that like I could be involved in another relationship with true love and knowing that that I was accepted.
That must have been a hard time where you didn't ever feel like you were good enough and didn't have that respect. And to now be in that type of relationship. I've been through some trauma myself. It will probably be my third book I write is a bit about trauma. And it's a serious topic, but I think one of my coping mechanisms is like kind of laugh about it. But, it was quite an evolution, and it took me a long time to get used to people actually, respecting me. Like, because I thought if somebody ever was treating me positively, they must
Right.
want something from me. And it's taken me a great number of years where I've continued to evolve and drop some of the habits that we were talking about, and sometimes you go 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, and
Right.
and then different things rear their head. But it sounds like you said you talked about little shifts and big shifts in your bracelets. Can you speak to what that is talking about?
So there's an amazing yoga teacher in Houston, Texas that I used to actually go to, and I really just loved her energy. Well, she like just now has written a book, and it's about like the pathway of transformation, but a lot of things is like the words that she uses that I'm like, I just love. I love and I gravitate to, because that was something that I dealt with, was like, words. What words do I put in my mind and meditate on? What do I intentionally go after? Not, I'm a horrible person, but I used to write on my mirror being like, just little bitty steps. That's all it takes. Just taking a shower and brushing your teeth, just little bitty steps. And so one of her things was in her book that she writes is like big shifts, little shifts. And so I really love when people have dynamic, little phrases to help you during your pathway of simplicity, because simplicity is the best form of action. You don't need to have that big idea. In order to get to that big idea, you have to have small little ideas to get to it, in order for it not to overtake you, I mean, like, you own your own business, if you were like, well, I'm going to sell 100 homes right now. Well, that seems very overwhelming, right? And like, let me just start off with just selling one, and then like next month, maybe 2,
Right.
Not overcome, like not, creating trauma for yourself to where you're like, I needed to sell 100 homes within this month, So,
yeah, I mean, it's funny you're mentioning this. Yeah, I'm in the middle of a move. We're moving from a beautiful house. We love our house, but I have my little studio here, my office here, my husband's here, my kids are growing, and it's getting a little tight. So we're moving to a bigger house. And then I'm sending a Marco Polo to my girlfriend, which I need to get Marco Polo to like sponsor my podcast. I think it's like the best thing in the world for friends to communicate back and forth.
Yeah, so my sister-in-law was actually telling me, like, we need to do this. And I'm like, really? Because I just like to have one form of communication. but I was like, okay, I'll get into it.
Well, it's my communication for my best friend and I,
That's
because
cute.
she homeschools her 2 boys and I'm running all day and we never can time it to talk to each other. Like by the time I'm like off my treadmill of like taking care of the kids and working and everything like that, it's like 8, 9 o'clock at
Yeah.
night and she's already turned in by then because she's like an early person. But I told her, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to start going to the gym early and like I'm adjusting my diet. And she's like, what the hell are you doing? Like you're going through like a move of your house right now. Like she's like, you just tread water for now with your health. Like don't beat yourself up and just like get through this. Like little shifts,
Yeah.
right? I'm already going through a big shift.
Right.
Let's not add in another big
Right.
shift at the same time.
Right.
I think you can do one big shift and a number of little
Right.
shifts at one time, but not 2 big shifts at one time.
Yeah. Don't do that. And that's
So-
where like, I'm like, oh,
Like,
communication on another thing. But that actually makes a lot of sense. I'm going to start doing Marco Polo. Because I can see where like,
It is nice. Like, because when I get to the end of my day, yeah,
I can see where like, you know, a lot of times I miss
it's kind of cool.
miss communicating with a lot of my friends because I'm so enthralled into the business, or they're enthralled in their stuff, you know, and it's like you can keep up with each other that way.
Mhm. Yeah. And it's more personal than a text. So we're like literally, you can see little like, well, that's not it, but that's Marco Polo for you. Those of you in YouTube get to see, but like you literally can like record like, hey Cypress, I'm recording a video of me on a podcast, and then stop, and then it sends it to her, and we have all our like little back and forth
That's
going
awesome.
on. Yeah. So it's kind of
I think
cool.
you've got me
Yeah.
into Marco Polo now.
It's pretty fun. You know, it's another thing, but I would just do it for VIPs. Now, you don't want to have like 7 of these Marco Polos going on. This is for like your 1 or 2 VIPs.
Right.
It's like for my very bestest
Right.
friend. So, well, you've been through definitely a lot. So it took you about probably 5 years to get to a point where you were much more like healthy again. And then, you know, from there, when did you kind of start Red Dot? And how did that come to fruition? And what were some of the different things that you went through to get to the point where you felt like you had enough brain space to start something new and you had the space to think of it?
Yeah. Great question.
Well, you talked about the CPT, obviously.
Yeah, no. I actually had a great friend of mine. I was looking for a job because I was like, okay, I was actually trying to get back into school and go to grad school for therapy, to become a therapist, and because I wanted to do expressive art therapy, and so, anyways, I was like, it was during COVID time, and I was like, if I don't get out, like, I'll never achieve being not a hermit. And so one of my friends was like, hey, I have an art gallery, and why don't you come and work for me? And I was like, okay. And I'd always been in the retail industry, but in the artsier retail industry, in the sense of I was a makeup artist, then I was a medical esthetician for a med spa. And so I was like, you know what? I need to like just get out there and be around people. And so I ended up going in and working and thriving and loving to sell art pieces. And hers is like very concentrated into Louisiana art. And so it's sort of, I'm from Louisiana, and it was really nostalgic in the sense of like knowing some artists that were from Louisiana and being able to connect. I got to connect with a lot of people from my hometown that I probably wouldn't have ran into. And so it also instilled in me like who I used to be as a person before I moved away. because I was living in Houston, Texas for a decade after college. And I was like, oh, this is who I used to be. I'm remembering who I am, and creating a grounding base. And so I was like looking, like as you're around art, as an artist myself, I was like, it gets to being very inspiring. And so I ended up, you know, creating this cuff. And I wasn't even trying to go into the jewelry business, but I was like, I really, like, I've always loved textiles, and I love vintage, and I love fashion in itself. I've always been somebody that dressed a little different than the normal person. I've always been known for that. It's just something that makes me happy every day. But so I was like, you know what? I'm going to find vintage textiles, and I'm going to see about like putting together a cuff, because I love cuffs. And so I ended up, within a year of working at that art gallery, I started making my own stuff. And of course, like, there was a framing shop connected to it. So I got to talk to a lot of people that are very creative. And so it really inspired me of just different things, like with chemistry to stuff like, just working with different fabrics, because there's a lot of detail that goes into making what I do. And within a month and a half, I figured out how my model was going to be. And so then I created the model, and I kept on creating it, and I started selling it at the art gallery, and it started making a wave where people just were attracted to it. And I was like, okay, there's something here. Like, I guess I hit something. And usually they say in business, like, when you hit a wave, go run with it. And so I ran with it, started doing booths. I have a background, like, with working with Neiman Marcus as a Chanel makeup artist. And so I knew sort of the ground where of how to create, a brand house. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to name my company? And so I was like, I'm going to name it Red Dot, because, like, every time you go into an art gallery, there's always a red dot that is beside an like a fine art painting that's been sold. And so the red dot comes from into the eyes of the beholder. And so it's a speaking into fruition that every one of my cuffs is sold. So that was something of power that I gave to that. I also, like, with the symbolism of the cuff, it almost, like, the 3-inch almost takes on that Wonder Woman effect, where it's like, no, we're Wonder Women, we're powerhouses, and just giving that power to the women that actually purchase it, or the men that purchase it for their women, So it kept on thriving like that. And I don't know, it keeps on getting better and better. Now we have 3 different sizes to give options to, but, it's pretty amazing how it's evolved. Like, I didn't realize the symbolism of what I was creating at that moment, of where it would take me to today, and how I can talk to people, because I want that to be the very thing that I do with people, is connecting with my customer base, connecting with people. I've had people, like I was just in Round Top. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but Round Top is like this artistry land that's for like a whole month in October almost, or it seemed like at this time. But it's a lot of artists. It's a lot of antiques, vintage things, and it's this small little town that hosts tons of people during this moment of time, and so like you're dealing with a lot of people that are going in and looking at art pieces to vintage antiques, and I get to sell my pieces there. And I'm like, every single time I'm talking to a customer, I'm sharing my testimony with them when I feel like it's the right time. And I'll have ladies start tearing up and telling me like, oh my God, I want to buy one of your cuffs because my daughter just went through this and she's still going through it, and I'm like, on my business card, there is my cell phone number. I want to talk to her if she would like to. It's a mission field for me. And it's been really incredible. I mean, we've just opened it up to now we do custom design where now that I've gotten married, I actually used the alterations of my wedding gown and I created my wedding dress on a cuff. And a lot of times, you don't get to wear your wedding dress again. It's in a box now, for memory. And so
Right.
I've now opened it up where it's like, we take in fabrics too. To we even do bereavement, to military, to christening gowns, you name it. I mean, we can handle, but I have bereavement. I had a lady come to me the other day and give me 3 different things that she wanted to do on 3 different cuffs. And it was for her husband and her son that had passed away. And so, we got to custom stamp inside of it, something that she could always hold as a memory, an heirloom that she could always wear and know that they were close to her. So the sky is the limits of like where it's taking us in my company. And I think that we hold pretty hardcore on the nostalgic memories that we're creating.
Well, I found it interesting. We talked about it a little bit earlier in this episode that you like to focus on a word. And I go to church, which is actually how I got introduced to you. There's somebody who's in my Bible study that does like your marketing. And he's like, there's someone you need to meet, Amy. And so I'm not saying everybody needs to go to church. Everybody has their own journey, but I do enjoy it. And like last week was all about kind of like stewardship and witness and those types of things. And the word I took from it was light. And I just noticed whenever I was going through situations and I was dealing with darkness, I would like visualize light and getting through light and, all about it. And it was so funny that I get through this podcast now. I'm like, be a light for all to see is the cup I ended up grabbing. But I haven't figured out my word for this week. Maybe light is also going to be my word for this week. It seems, since I've not switched words, but I do find that there is some power in like intention. I remember reading too a book about focus by Eric Qualman. And I ended up making like a bracelet that just said like focus ninja. And I was like looking at it all the time. And like I had like such like a focused existence. And so I think, that grounding aspect, the certain textiles and the memories and the feeling and the words, I think putting that all together is just so creative. Could you have even imagined this happening like 4 years ago?
No.
Right? I mean, that's 2 years before you started.
Yeah, I know. I literally was like, well, maybe, maybe I'll just be selling art. I I literally did not know my future, and I didn't know how to get to it. But I knew that, I mean, I grew up as a preacher's kid, and I'm a
Mhm.
Christian as well. But uh, I knew that God had his hand on me. I knew that,
Yeah.
sorry, I knew
No,
that he
you're
was
fine.
guiding me.
I don't know if you noticed, I started crying a little bit earlier in the podcast. I'm like, okay, we're so
Yeah, like I'll
yeah.
tear up because I mean, I feel like God has blessed me a lot. Like, I knew when I got away that I was determined that if I survived that, then I could do so much more. And
Hmm.
I knew that God was guiding me to the right people that I needed to talk to, the
Hmm.
right environments that I needed to be in. And it it's been really magical to see that. And actually, like, I started doing meditation on things, and I was like, man, this is like so much more simpler than what I was thinking. Because a lot of times you don't think that intentional meditation is required, but like just focusing
Hmm.
on something for 5 minutes is all you need, and
Hmm.
to see where it takes you and to see how it guides you is incredible. And that's the thing about whether you believe in God or not, like meditation and concentrating on something that is powerful versus something that is like something that happens whenever you're going through trauma, like any kind of trauma. Like a lot of times you're focused on that negative growth,
Yep.
and
Yep.
regardless of what you really think that you're focused on, but like, because a lot of times you can just be like, God, why does this always happen to me? And it's like, it's it's not that it's happening to you, it's the fact that, like, if you would just put your eyes on positive thinking, positive
Right.
growth, so much more could happen for you. You know,
Yes.
I literally, I mean, and I'm not saying that I never had bad, I mean, obviously I had bad days with what I was telling y'all, but but you know, knowing that eventually something was going to occur to pop in. And even with my business, I mean, it's been very intentional growth, like in the sense that I didn't even know how it would take me. I try to share with people, it's like you start off doing something and then you realize, like, okay, I want to sort of refocus and do something like this to create this shift. Like,
Hmm.
you know, you start somewhere and then you grow to being somewhere else. And that's the magical piece, you know?
Hmm.
If you just put a little bit of time in you, see where it takes you, you know, because you're worth it.
Yeah. It's interesting too. You spoke a little bit about when you first started, you were doing it as part of like a shop where there were other people who were doing art and you were in that environment. And I find when I'm either on this podcast or I'm with friends and I'm with other people on the path, even if we might be doing different things, but it's on like we're trying to move forward, how
Right.
powerful that is as well. And that must have also helped a lot with getting that going.
It did. It really did. And then on top of it, just like we don't have a brick or mortar shop for Red
Mhm.
Dot, but we have a website. So I do a lot of going to booths or going to shows,
Mhm.
to spread the word out. Because we're still young,
Yeah.
we're not everybody. We haven't reached everybody, right? So it's incredible. Like whenever you're working with others, even though you have your own booth, you have your neighbors that are right next to you.
Mhm.
And I've always been somebody that is a huge believer that, like, if I'm encouraging others and I'm also selling their things, it comes back to you. You know, it's a sisterhood.
Mhm.
It's a brotherhood, because I don't mind also helping men out as well. It's like, you should go see what they have to offer, because I mean, for me, my stuff is about artistry, right? But there's enough to go around, there's not this competition that we have to deal with. And sometimes I think that, like, in society, people will think like, oh, well, I'm not going to give credit to that person because, that
Right.
would shy away from me. And honestly, like, I find that, like, we're all in it together.
Mhm.
There's enough to go around. A person might like my stuff, but they also might like yours. So why wouldn't I share it? Like, I mean, I work with another lady that sells jewelry, and she sells bracelets as well, but she sells, jewels, and it's Ashley Langley's jewels.
Mhm.
But I'll wear her things with mine, and I'll be like, "Oh, you love that bracelet? Like, this is where you find it." You know,
Yeah.
I find that, like, helping each other out in small businesses, it's so hard in the social media world to get people's attention. We should be helping each other. You know, I mean, when I go to Round Top, we're all together. I usually showcase my things at Boone and Company, which is a restaurant out there. And there's about 6 of us women that are selling our own stuff. And we're all ringing up everybody's things. We have separate Shopify's, let's say. And it's like, oh, you want that from her? Okay, I'll ring that up for you. Because let's say she had to step away or whatever. It's
Yeah.
like, a lot of times in sales, and like when I was at Neiman Marcus, it would be like, oh, well, I'm going to bring them over to Chanel, right? But I was never that kind of person. I was like, oh, if that's what you want, then I can sell that for you.
Yeah.
But I think that, helping each other out, yes, you want to be a competitor. You want to be in
Mhm.
the field of, like, selling your things, but you can also help others out while you're in it.
I absolutely agree, and I got to see like an example firsthand. Well, a few today. I mean, I had coffee with someone who's a quote unquote competitor, but they do some stuff that's slightly different. And so I love to, if it's not like the right fit for me, I love to send stuff out to other brokers. But I was going to someone to lunch today at Country Club of Orlando to celebrate a closing. We show up. There's not a parking spot. There has to be 200 parking like cars in the parking lot. We're like, what is going on? And it's the Mary Market. And there's all these local shops, both brick and mortar and online, that have all the goodies for all the things. And those women and men, let me tell you what, they had so much synergy with each other. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I show
Sorry.
up and I'm walking to lunch and they're like, oh, you have a headband on, Amy. We know this place that you need to go. You got to go check out Sprinkle Dash. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
so I got, I got some, like, I'm known for my headbands, and I have a
Yeah, they're super
Thanksgiving headband
cute.
now that has turkeys
That's
and
awesome.
leaves on it and cornucopias, and it is wild. And so, but like,
That's
it was
awesome.
another person and I didn't even walk past them, but they're like, you got to go check them out. And so I saw that synergy. So I completely agree with that. I think we have time for one more thought. We talked a little bit about in our call, before the call, we started to realize that there's this push by society to have this like Pinterest perfect persona, but then often it comes at the toll of your mental psyche. And then, but sometimes being authentic can be short term, like hard, because maybe in your particular case, for you to be fully authentic, your authentic self is that you've been through this trauma and it might be hard to share, but long term you're probably benefiting other people and benefiting yourself. You want to chat a little bit about that?
Um, I think that when you go through something that I've gone through,
Mhm.
you want people to understand you because you already feel like you are different. And there's usually this thought process that occurs that it's like, oh my God, I'm scaring everybody with how I'm talking, because you're just like in a rant, you're trying to, like, you're in a cycle in your brain.
Mhm.
And so there was a moment that I stopped talking completely of like what I had gone through, unless I
Right.
felt like I was in a safe zone.
Yeah.
Um, what was incredible was I had first started my company with Red Dot, and I didn't really share my story of my path of how I got there. And I was like, I don't want people to feel sorry for me if I share, what I've gone through. That's not what my motive is
Right.
behind, selling my cuffs. But I happened to do a get together at a home that was one of my mom's really good friends and one of my cousins. And they had all these ladies come in and they asked me if I would share with them, how Red Dot came about. And I felt the need to share my background for the
Mhm.
first time. And it was probably like 8 months into me creating Red Dot. And I shared my story, and everybody was just so quiet and crying. And they were like, after I shared, they all came up to me and they were like, thank you so much for sharing your story. Like, thank you for your bravery, for sharing your story, because I've been dealing with some things and I've needed to hear that I'm enough, that I'm okay, that I'm worthy. And and that, I think, set me to the goal that I was like, I'm going to start sharing my story now because people need to hear it. And I mean, like, going through that time period, I'd gotten diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which has to deal with your thyroid. And so my brain was sort of like just going everywhere. Like, I couldn't concentrate, but yet I was like determined to do my business, but I didn't feel good in my head or my body. And so I would suffer sometimes with the authenticity of like being able to connect with people. It took about a year for me to stabilize things, but I still pushed myself to share because it was like I knew it was needed. Like, sometimes I didn't want to do photos. Sometimes, because you don't feel good in your body. So it was
Right.
like sometimes I just didn't feel like it, but I was like, I have to do this
Mhm.
because this is my mission field. Like, I started it. I have to do it.
And you can't wait for the perfect moment.
And yeah. And, sometimes I'd be like, I don't feel good today, but you know what? I'm so happy that you came over and talked to me because you're what lit me up today.
Yeah.
You lighted me up and it made me feel better. And so that in itself also was healing and being authentic. I felt because I don't, I never wanted to be closed off. I want people to realize like the daily grind is real. And you don't feel good sometimes, but it's a must to connect because we all need each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's so true. And I think sometimes, like today, I've had a long day with the day after the election, which we're not going to even talk about, but I'm like tired. And a lot of people are tired, but I have like dinner with like a friend tonight. And like, I kind of want to like get in my pajamas. But then I'm like, no, we're going to have an amazing dinner. It's going to be so much fun. And sometimes if you do the things you don't want to do, but you know it's the right thing to do, and you kind of push through that, and you have that persistence to go through that, you just get stronger. You're building these different muscles. I mean, Izzy, I can't wait to share with you too, my book, because so much of what you're doing has to do with, like, I created what's called like the sport success system, and you're surrounding yourself with the right people. You're being persistent. You're trying to learn. You're doing things that are different. You're continuing to like eradicate bad habits, and all. It's just amazing. And so you are well on your way for success, and like it's amazing. So I really enjoyed our chat.
I can't wait to hear all about your book.
Yes, it's exciting. So, how do people get a hold of you? Oh, and is there anything else we want to chat about? But I think we kind of covered everything I kind of outlined.
Well, great. So how everybody can get a hold of us is through our website, which is www.redott.com, and that's REDDOTT.com.
Mm-hmm.
Or by my email, which is izzy@reddott.com, or by my cell phone too, if you're wanting to chat, which I don't know. Should I give my cell phone out on this one?
Let them email you first, and then you can give it out. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's how you can get a hold of me. Something that I did want to say is like when you're in a creative field, sometimes you can get in a zone that you can get, bombarded where you can't get creativity. And so something to that effect, what I do in order to get my creative juices going is like go and travel, be in nature. Something that was really funny. The person that that works with me, he was like, tell something funny. And I was like, well, definitely I have something funny where it's like, I went camping for the first time this summer, never had gone camping before. And I told my husband, I was like, all I require is a toilet. That's all I require is a toilet if we go camping. And maybe an outhouse. I would like to take a shower as well if we're going to be gone for 5 days. I don't really want you to be smelling me in the sense of like, what if I smell like BO or something like that? But so he did find something, and we went to Colorado. It was a bathhouse that had hot tubs that were like, pure hot tubs, but they had bathhouses and stuff. And we were around the sand dunes, But and this is just to give you an imagery of what I do, is like just being in nature actually feel like it facilitates like fabrics in my head, ideas that I want to do. And so just being in nature, there was a labyrinth that was in there, and it was like, even going through the labyrinth, I was like, we're on a journey. Like we don't know where we're going, but we're on a journey. And something that you said earlier, like when you see darkness, you also end up seeing light. Something that I learned in therapy was like, in order to see light, you go through the darkness. You have to go through darkness in order to see the light. And so it is its own journey. But I mean, I think that that's where my cuffs stimulated, was the fact that, they're a journey to be worn. You can start with one and have just one intention, or you can create it as a monthly thing where it's like, okay, I focused on this intention, and so now I've overcome that intention, and now I'm going to the next one, creating it as an achievement,
Yeah. No, I've had before, my business coach. No, I don't even have it in my office. I'm in the middle of moving in the next few weeks. And so like half my stuff's in storage, but he got me this cool wood thing that said entering one year. And I was like, oh, and then it was so good to like look at that all the time. But yeah, this has been awesome. And I mean, I really appreciate you sharing, and I can't wait for this to come out. I know that it's probably difficult to share a lot of what you did, but I know that it will really help a lot of people. So,
not at all.
Yeah. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. A big thank you to Izzy for sharing her story and the mission behind Red Dot. Remember, embrace your own narrative and live authentically. It can be one of the most powerful things you do. If this conversation resonated with you, please be sure to visit reddot.com or even Beyond Commercial to connect with me for more inspiration. I now have my upcoming book, From Perfect to Real, Ditch Perfectionism, Shift Your Mindset, and Thrive on Your Own Terms. That's coming out in early 2025, and that's available on amycalandrino.com. So let's all continue to go beyond, bringing out and strengthening that performance mindset. This is Amy Calandrino signing off.